In the 1780s, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart achieved another enormous breakthrough. He actually made it as a freelance composer, the first in history. As you can see for yourself, this was a period in Mozart's short life when he could actually indulge himself in a few luxuries. During the years he lived in Vienna, he actually made quite a handsome annual salary. He was earning more than Joseph Haydn or the great poet Schiller, and he was able to surround himself with an approximation of the luxuries he had found so desirable while traveling around the great courts of Europe as a child. When Mozart lived here, this apartment consisted of a kitchen, an attic, a cellar, 3 living rooms, and this small but charming salon with a stucco ceiling which would not have been out of place in a Baroque palace. The furniture included 4 beds, 5 cupboards, 4 sofas, a writing table, and a manuscript cupboard. And if that wasn't more than enough to fill this place to overflowing, the Mozarts also had, of course, a piano and a billiard table, which occupied 1 whole room. The neighborhood wasn't bad either, right in the center of town, in the shadow of St. Stephen's Cathedral. 1783 and 1784 were among the happiest and most successful years in Mozart's life. His income from composition commissions, publishing rights, concert appearances, and teaching was good. He was without a doubt one of the best paid soloists in Vienna. His annual income was around 2,000 to 4,000 guilders, and a considerable increase was just around the corner. He'd come a long way from his 450 guilder job as concertmaster in Salzburg. By way of comparison, let's take a brief look at what some of his contemporaries were earning. Haydn's top fee from his patron Count Esterhazy was 1,000 guilders a year. Orchestral musicians were paid 300 guilders, and a housemaid working for one of the better families got 25. Mozart lived well and could comfortably afford it. Most of his income was derived from so-called academies. These were not educational institutions, but rather concerts of incredible length and variety, usually given to honor a single musician, who always appeared as featured performer and got to keep a fair piece of the take. The artist in question would always be represented by a couple of symphonies, a concerto or 2, perhaps a chamber work or an aria, and occasionally something by another composer, usually dedicated to his distinguished colleague. It was one of the first steps in the development of music as a business, in which the composer was not an employee working for some noble on a salaried basis, writing music to entertain his lordship's guests. On the contrary, he was fully involved both financially and artistically in the whole operation. This concerto, K466, which was the featured work on one such academy, provides a fascinating illustration of the way art is seldom a carbon copy of life. If it were, we would certainly never have heard this dark, ominous, and highly dramatic D minor introduction, with its nervous string figures, its powerful brass chords, and the repeated sighing motive in the woodwinds, not to mention the haunting drive of the solo part. There's no point in looking for superficial reasons in Mozart's physical circumstances. Romantic as the notion may seem, Mozart saw no need to put the sunshine of his best years in every single note he wrote. This concerto is far more a reflection of what he was doing musically at the time, writing operas full of high drama and with a new stress on minor keys. Perhaps a tranquil plateau is an ideal vantage point for looking deeply into the heart of darkness. More likely, Mozart was just a professional musician doing his job at the highest philosophical level. Vienna is the best city for my métier, Mozart had exulted when he started his career here 2 years earlier. Finally, he had a chance to socialize with like-minded friends and colleagues. Mozart and Constanze were on the go all the time, telling jokes, some of them probably filthy. Plus a house full of dinner guests and billiard players all kept things moving at high gear in the Mozart home. Constanze looked after the guests while the man of the house played concerts or composed amidst great noise, laughter and activity at home. These were the working conditions he loved. And he had every reason in the world to be in such good spirits. On March 23, 1783, the Viennese flocked in droves to attend a concert in the presence of the emperor and the composer Gluck at Vienna's Court Theatre, featuring Mozart and his sister-in-law, Aloysia Lange.
The theatre was very full, and I was received again by the Viennese public so cordially that I really ought to feel delighted. I'd already left the platform, but the audience wouldn't stop clapping, and so I had to repeat the rondo, upon which there was a regular torrent of applause. It's a good advertisement for my concert which I'm giving on Sunday.
2 years later, Mozart was still at the height of his success. 1785 started off with a bang. Vienna was at the height of Fasching, the silly season that precedes Lent in many Roman Catholic countries. This is a time of masquerade balls, wild parties every night, casual and not so casual flirtations. As a matter of fact, things got so hot and heavy at various points in history that the adultery laws were actually suspended in some areas. For the Mozarts who adored partying, the Vienna pantomime season was just what the doctor ordered.
I think that during the last carnival days, we shall collect a company of masqueraders and perform a small pantomime, but please don't betray us. Not a soul must know about it, but I should very much like to go as Harlequin, because there are so many, indeed nothing but, silly asses at these masquerades. So I should like you to send me your Harlequin costume, but please do so very soon. On Carnival Monday, our company went to the masquerade where we performed a pantomime which exactly filled the half-hour pause in the dancing. My sister-in-law was Columbine, I Harlequin, my brother-in-law Piero, an old dancing master Pantaloon, and the painter the Doctor. Both the plot and the music of the pantomime were mine. The dancing master was so kind as to coach us, and I must say that we played it charmingly. Last week I gave a ball in my own rooms, but of course those who came each paid 2 gulden. We began at 6 o'clock in the evening and kept on till 7. What, only an hour? Of course not, I mean 7 o'clock next morning.
In the midst of all this turbulent activity, they received the news that Wolfgang's father was on his way from Salzburg. Even though they exchanged an average of 2 letters a week, relations between Mozart and his father had cooled down somewhat since he married Constanze and quit his job in Salzburg. At the time, his father had sent off some harsh words to Vienna, addressed to none other than the young couple's great patroness.
If only I hadn't discovered such cardinal faults in my son, that he's too lackluster or sleepy, too comfortable, perhaps sometimes too proud, or he's too hot-headed and can't wait for anything but must make his fortune right this second. These are the 2 opposite poles which rule his spirit.
The only time the family had been together since that letter was back in 1783, when Wolfgang and Constanze made a brief visit to Salzburg. In an effort to reconcile his father to his new wife, he hastily arranged a performance of selections from a work in progress, his C minor Mass, at St. Peter's Church with Constanze as soprano soloist. The Mass had been written to keep a vow to celebrate his betrothal with a liturgical composition. If this performance was designed to cement relations between Salzburg and Vienna, it must have failed abjectly. Mozart never finished it. Mozart had meanwhile become quite the big city sophisticate. Now he simply couldn't relate to his bucolic birthplace anymore, and spent most of his time there cooling his heels and yearning to get back to his new home. His fondness for freedom and independence, which flourished in Emperor Joseph's Vienna, had altered his conversational style, his interests, and his circle of friends, which explains why the couple's 3 months in Salzburg had proven so disappointing. They never returned. Leopold wasn't all that excited about visiting his son in Vienna either. From his letters, we see the main reason for the trip was boredom and not the eager anticipation of a reunion with his son. Mozart's sister, Nano, had recently married, and now he was all alone in Salzburg. His son's concert schedule was jam-packed. Leopold attended one of his academies and found it so superb that his eyes filled with tears. And he personally witnessed the emperor, thrilled to the point of calling out, "Bravo, Mozart!" But Leopold saw the greatest confirmation for both his son and himself at a private concert in the Mozart salon. Haydn often visited the Mozarts to play quartets. In fact, Mozart contended he had learned quartet writing from his older colleague. On this occasion, however, he had been invited to listen to a read-through of the final 3 of a series of 6 quartets. The composer's moving dedication is virtually on a level with the sincerity of the music.
To my dear friend Haydn, a father who decided to send his sons out into the great world thought it his duty to entrust them to the protection and guidance of a man who was very celebrated at the time and who, moreover, happened to be his best friend. In like manner, I send my 6 sons to you, most celebrated and very dear friend. They are indeed the fruit of a long and laborious study, but the hope which many friends have given me that this toil will be in some degree rewarded encourages me and flatters me with the thought that these children may one day prove a source of consolation to me. During your last stay in this capital, you yourself, my very dear friend, expressed to me your approval of these compositions. Your good opinion encourages me to offer them to you and leads me to hope that you will not consider them wholly unworthy of your favor. Please then receive them kindly and be to them a father, guide, and friend. From this moment I surrender to you all my rights over them. I entreat you, however, to be indulgent to those faults which may have escaped a father's partial eye, and in spite of them, to continue your generous friendship towards one who so highly appreciates it. Meanwhile, I remain with all my heart your most sincere friend.
Clearly, these quartets meant a great deal to the composer. When we look at the score, we can see the intensity and incredible concentration involved in creating these works. Nowhere has Mozart made so many corrections. He even corrected the printing plates. He wanted to produce something worthwhile for this man he admired so much, and he succeeded. They were performed in the Mozart home. Leopold was the first violinist, and Wolfgang played the viola. Some lineup. How would you like to have been one of the other two players? It was during this evening that Haydn spoke those famous words to Leopold.
I tell you before God as an honest man, your son is the greatest composer whose name or person I have ever known. He has taste, and more than that, an overwhelming knowledge of the art of composition.
Leopold couldn't have had it on higher authority that his faith in the genius and the education of his talented son had been justified. Throughout Europe, Haydn was looked upon as the greatest of all composers, and this was surely one of the happiest moments in Leopold's life. This was one of the quartets played that evening. The boldness of the harmonic progressions in the introduction have produced a whole spate of literature and even the nickname the Dissonance Quartet, based on the assumption that some of these notes were printing errors. As a matter of fact, even Leopold had his doubts when he looked at the score. But nobody made any of these objections after the first performance. When he returned to Salzburg, Leopold realized what a long way he had come since he first noticed his son's remarkable talent. Perhaps Wolfgang hadn't had the career his father once envisioned, but there was certainly no questioning either Wolfgang's musical genius or his resounding success. This is one of Mozart's grand pianos, here in the Mozart Museum in the house where he was born in Salzburg. It dates from those Viennese years, and it was built by Johann Walter. Tone sounds a lot different from a modern piano, doesn't it? Well, this is due to the lighter frame construction and less tension in the strings and hammers which are covered with goat skin instead of the felt that's used today, and finally to a mechanical action that's a model of simplicity. Not that the piano was always an object of joy to them. Leopold wrote, "It is impossible to describe all of the bother and commotion. Since my arrival, your brother's grand piano has been carried out of the house to the theater or to another house at least 12 times." On the very day of Leopold's arrival in Vienna, he'd been able to see how incredibly close the finished composition and the first public performance of a piece were. Picture this. Leopold arrived in the city on February 11th, 1785, to find his son writing a new piano concerto for a performance that very night. Every time a few pages were completed, they were passed to the waiting copyist. Now, you may ask, what about a rehearsal for a new piece? Sorry, not enough time. So the third movement was sight read in public with Mozart as the soloist. It was this concerto, K466.